At what is expected to be an historic summit. CCTV's Michael Voss is there. Michael, anticipation must be growing for this summit as it becomes the backdrop, really, for history.
Mike, you used the word historic. This is the first time that Cuba has been allowed to attend an event under the auspices of the Organization of American States, which suspended it back in 1962 when Cuba's former leader, Fidel Castro, moved Cuba into the communist camp. The 7th Summit of the Americas, which got underway a short while ago, just behind me here at the Convention Center. It comes just 4 months after US President Barack Obama announced that he planned to end half a century of hostility towards Cuba. And by allowing Cuba's President Raul Castro to attend the event, the US also hopes that this will help improve relations with the rest of the region, which has long objected to Cuba's exclusion.
US President Barack Obama had hoped to arrive in Panama with negotiations to restore diplomatic relations with Cuba concluded, but they do appear tantalizingly close. The fact that Cuban President Raul Castro was able to fly here to attend the summit is seen as a major breakthrough, and the two leaders did speak by phone earlier in the week.
Today, as we gather in Panama City,
the U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry held lengthy discussions here with his Cuban counterpart, Bruno Rodriguez, the highest-level diplomatic meeting in 50 years. Now their bosses will set time aside to meet on Saturday.
The two leaders, I think, will be able to address and take stock in any discussion they have where we are in the process of normalization, where we are in the discussions around the establishment of embassies, and where we are going to continue to have differences and be upfront and candid about those differences.
Differences with Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro may prove more difficult to resolve after the Obama administration recently designated Venezuela a threat to U.S. national security.
We need justice on the basis of respect between peoples and government. It's not time for imperialism and threats. It's a time for peace.
Anti-American sentiments were also on display at the Fringe Summit of the People, which brings together left-leaning groups from across the Americas. Improved relations with Cuba hasn't ended the chance of down with Yankee imperialism.
Mike, no such hostility at the main summit, though, only praise for a bold move. Friday evening saw the inauguration of the summit. They get down to business on Saturday morning. Mike.
Michael, it looked as though this was going to be smooth sailing for the Obama administration. You mentioned improving relations, this overture to Cuba, and yet the events with Venezuela, we see those protests. Does it appear in some respects to the people you're talking to that the U.S. is somewhat tone deaf when it comes to the region?
I think there was a feeling that this was an inept move, in a sense, to do this just before the summit. There's been a bit of backtracking. There's been, I think, attempts on both sides to try and defuse the situation. President Obama did publicly say that naming Venezuela as a threat to U.S. national security was a pro forma thing that was needed in order to put sanctions in place. And then he went on to say that actually, the country is not a threat to the U.S. and the U.S. has no plans to intervene. Whether that's going to be enough to completely defuse it, but that's the sort of language that does not play well across Latin America, which remembers some of the sort of interventionist policies of the past and feel it smacks of that. But I don't think it's going to cast that big a shadow over this event.